Welcome to Snakes and Otters, a pointless discussion of eternal questions. Get ready, we're about to live in your head rent-free. Hello, Otterites. This is episode 137.
I am Martin.
And I'm Robert.
And I'm Francis.
All right, fellas, I am sitting in the captain's chair today. And even though we had a little bit of confusion about who was doing what, I'm in charge, so don't forget it.
Yes, sir.
So that's the little bit of levity that we will probably, only a little bit of levity we will probably have for this particular episode.
You are correct, sir. Yes.
So we're doing history today, and we're doing a subject that's a very poignant moment in time, not just for our generation, but really for the entire country.
But in particular, to Gen X, it is a very important moment.
It's one of our two Kennedy moments. We actually have two, because we all remember where we were when we found out Reagan was shot. Mm-hmm. And we also all remember what we were doing when we found out the shuttle Challenger exploded. Two very defining moments in the 80s for us. And I want to start off with a quote from Reagan. The speech was written by Peggy Noonan, fantastic speechwriter in the Reagan White House. And this is basically the last paragraph. And he said, "The crew of the Space Shuttle Challenger honored us by the manner in which they lived their lives. We will never forget them, nor the last time we saw them this morning, as they prepared for their journey and waved goodbye and slipped the surly bonds of earth to touch the face of God." Well, I love that quote for a lot of reasons. I mean, this could be a code of honor quote.
It could.
It really could.
Well, I've used part of the speech, I believe, as a code of honor.
Did you?
I believe I used "The future doesn't belong to the faint-hearted."
Oh, yes, a different part of the
that is from that speech.
Yes. So, when he talks about how we saw them this morning, when you think about, for those of us that remember it, the video of them is laughing and joking as they get on this on the shuttle, and 73 seconds after launch, it explodes. And it was so shocking. It was one of those, you flinch when you see it the first time.
Well, and it was teed up different than the other shuttle launches because of the presence of Christopher Koloff.
Yes, this is the first time we had sent a civilian into space. It was a teacher. And it was very much hyped, because this is 1986. By this time, shuttle launches were kind of old hat.
It was the 25th launch, I believe, of the program.
Yes.
Something like that.
Yeah, it was something like that, yeah.
And there just hadn't been a space program issue or accident since Apollo 13.
Right.
Which really, it happened when we were fairly young. We might not.
I don't even remember it.
Yeah, I just remember the Apollo program in general. I don't remember Apollo 13 specifically.
I remember the moon landing in '68. I was very small, but it was one of those things.
I'm impressed that because you were only 2. Not even 2 yet.
3.
Well, I was 3.
Not even 3, yes.
Yeah, but it was one of those moments that, I was gathered with my parents, because my sister was, she was an infant. And we watched it, and it was like a thing, because that's what it was. Yeah. It drew. Right. You could sense.
It was a momentous moment.
As a small child, even a teeny weeny child, you sensed the room of, this is something special.
Essentially, in our lifetime, the space program had been nothing but a success.
Yes.
We could not conceive of it being otherwise.
Apollo 1 was during our lifetime, but, we don't remember that yet.
I mean, essentially, it had been 15 years since there had been any kind of accident at all.
Right.
By the time of Challenger.
And it was almost 20 years since any loss of life.
Yes. So it was the success of the space program, and that these things just worked, for people our age, was almost taken for granted.
Well, exactly. It was the Enterprise. I mean, it was, you just went to space because it's what you do. All that kind of... the thing around it is like, that's where we're supposed to be. It's the final frontier. Here we are. We're making this happen. And,
it was so
we
mundane.
Can't be defeated.
It was so mundane that, some of them used to joke about their glorified truck drivers, because all they were doing was shuttling cargo up into space.
Yeah.
Which, was a good deal of what they're doing. I mean, they also did scientific experiments, but that was just part of the joke. That's how routine it became.
Well, and the Cold War was really baked into this whole thing here, because Sputnik caught us very off guard in the 50s. And since then, we made a decision. Kennedy started that, but really every president after that says, we will be the dominant force. And some of that jingoism was the fuel that worked for this. We have to be there because the Russians will be otherwise. It was a very big deal to have the first reusable spaceship.
Yeah, that was one of the big selling points to the American public. I was totally fascinated with the shuttles, especially up through the first Columbia launch.
Yeah.
It was something that, and of course, being a Trek fan, the fact they named it the test ship, the Enterprise, was a phenomenal thing.
That's what caught me when they first started talking about the space shuttle. This is in the mid to late 70s. I'm thinking, what? Why would you do anything different than what you've already been doing that has worked so well? The whole rockets up and down. I'm thinking, that's the model. And then all of a sudden, it was one of my first exposures to the fact that if you think differently, if you are innovative and creative and not bound by convention, you are truly on your way to stardom, to success. And in fact, that's the only way it works. Staying the same it was one of those almost religious experiences that you realized, wait a minute, and Darwinism will kill you if you don't adapt. And it's kind of like, I couldn't have articulated that, but that's the space shuttle was what brought that into my mind, saying, wait a minute, we can do better, we can do different, we can think differently. Holy crap, this is fantastic.
So it's January of 86.
January 28th.
We're all on campus.
All on campus, that's right.
All Bellarmine, yep.
And again, just the shuttle was something you took for granted. Oh, they're having lunch today?
Yeah. Not all of them were covered, but because of...
Certainly by then.
Yeah, and...
This one was on CNN
because of Kristen McCall. That's the reason, and there was a political aspect of that was a Reagan thing, thinking, okay, we're going to do this, and it's going to do this. Yeah. So everybody's watching. And, that's one of the reasons we have the footage of them, that iconic now moment of them going onto the gangplank.
Well, all of that stuff is filmed anyway, so...
Yeah, but it was... Most of the time, it never...
Well, yeah, you never saw it, but I mean, it was... We would have that film of everybody. You got to see it.
Yeah.
Well, probably almost nobody saw it anyways, because even though it was the teacher going up, most people who were watching it were actually kids in school, because this was a big deal. This was actually a very traumatic event for a lot of them, because...
Very much so.
A teacher died... literally on screen for them.
Well, yeah, yes. and it's not like it's already happened and we're going to, like 9/11, it happens and then everybody tunes in. Nobody watches it live, or like Kennedy.
But the kids did.
But the kids did this time. That's what's different about this issue. Yeah. It's literally
a live disaster.
A live disaster, which doesn't happen.
It's probably the first live disaster. In history.
Yeah.
Because up to then, it's
with something like when Kennedy's assassinated, nobody knows that until it's happened, and then all of a sudden it's 24/7
Well,
coverage.
after it's happened, yes.
Exactly, after it's happened, and then all of a sudden it works its way out. Same as with 9/11, something happens and it works its way out. Yeah. This is on the moment. Yeah.
So
for many of our most vulnerable.
For those of our younger listeners, who I'm sure we have many, and for our older listeners who just don't remember as well as we do, just give some background here. So the space shuttle, there are 7 astronauts. And this is actually a full ride because they weren't always 7 astronauts, but this is a full ride. They've got a lot of things going on with this one. There's experiments. There's the whole teacher in space thing. She was actually going to teach from the space shuttle.
Right.
So I mean, they had this thing. It was a big PR thing.
Well, the State of the Union message was scheduled for that evening.
It was,
and it was written into the State of the Union. Reagan was going to mention it to the speech to Congress about how successful the program was.
Yeah, and of course the speech to Congress was delayed because of this.
Sure.
Instead, he gave the speech.
Yeah, I mean, thinking about they canceled the State of the Union. Peggy Noonan writes this incredible address for him to go on television with.
And of course, he delivers it as only he could.
Yeah,
that's correct. It was an amazing moment, and he was called a great communicator. This is one of those moments that solidified. Even his opponents said, "Yeah, that is history being made. Something we will not forget that moment."
Yeah, it was amazing to watch him on television deliver that speech.
It was so needed at
Very
the time
moving,
because
very moving.
we didn't, like I say, we didn't witness it as it happened, but we were right after that. I mean, literally, I was prepared to go to. It happens at 11:39. I'm in my dorm room preparing to go to a 12:30 production management class, and I just happened to have the TV on, and all of a sudden they break in and they tell this, and this is only a few minutes later, and all of a sudden you get the video footage, and you see the parachute drop, which is one of those great ironic moments of media cluelessness, although it's somewhat understandable, thinking, oh my gosh, maybe somebody survived, and of course they come a few minutes later, no, those are rescue teams being deployed. I mean, come on, let's not do stupid stuff here.
Yeah. So, we've got just give the names because I really should have done this beforehand.
Yes,
of the 7. That's
so the crew was actually announced a year prior, almost to the day, January 27th, and it was commanded by Francis Scobie. Michael Smith was the pilot. Ellison Onizuka was the mission specialist, along with Judith Resnick and Ron McNair.
Ron McNair, one of the first African Americans in space.
Yep. This is probably the most diverse shuttle crew.
Ellison Onizuka, the first Asian American in space.
Exactly. So we had a teacher, we had black man, Jewish, we had 2 women in this. So anyways, Judith Resnick and Ronald McNair, and the payload specialists were Gregory Jarvis, and Krista McAuliffe, of course, who was part of the Teacher in Space project.
Yep.
And it was this is a point in time when the country was still incredibly full of optimism and hope. The recovery from the late 70s and the very early 1982 recession has just been going like gangbusters. Everything is humming along.
Interest rates are reasonable again. There's
everything
no gas
is just
lines,
phenomenal.
No energy crisis, no inflation. All those things those malaises in the 70s that just plagued everything.
Yeah, all that's gone.
And it's almost like a switch was flipped.
Yes.
And the optimism, the shuttle program was endemic of that. It was like it's the poster child of things are better now than they were just a few years ago. And this was kind of a hard knock of reality.
Oh, this is a gut punch.
Yeah, saying this is, yes, they may be better, and yes, this is a great thing, but don't you dare get too cocky, because things are still dangerous out there. And that's...
So, the mission was actually scheduled to go off the previous July.
Yes, it had been delayed.
So it had been delayed several times, first to November and then to January. Now, of course, they take off from Florida, and it is uncharacteristically cold.
Which is the actual X factor that doomed.
Which is the X factor. Yes. So,
as
everybody knows who knows anything about this, the O-rings were the primary failure point. Although you could say the decision to launch was the primary failure point.
Yes. The O-rings are built into what are called the solid rocket boosters. These are multi-section rocket boosters.
Solid fuel boosters.
Solid fuel boosters. The idea here is that these pliable O-rings under the pressure will expand and hold these sections together without leaks. But because it was only 20 degrees or so...
28, I think it was actually like 28 degrees,
yeah,
same as the day.
I mean, super, super, super cold for Florida. The O-rings were not pliable enough to not prevent gases escaping from the sections of the boosters.
Which were ignited.
Those ignited, burned through to the liquid...
to the O2 tank, liquid oxygen tank.
The external fuel tank that fueled the shuttle's engines, and that's... the explosion.
That's the explosion, yes. And so actually, I said 20. Actually, it was 18 degrees overnight, rose to 22, and was 26 at the time of the launch at 9:38.
That's super, super
and
cold.
Really, is, at the time it was seen as a terrible accident, and it was, but the investigation goes back and realizes there was some concern by the manufacturer and many of the NASA people that cold weather will inhibit this.
Right.
Issue.
They actually did warn specifically about the O-ring. So this wasn't a total surprise. Oh, maybe it's not a good idea to launch in cold. No, it's not a good idea to launch in cold because of this same reason.
Correct.
That ends up destroying it.
And the investigation comes back later and says it was the cultural climate of NASA at the time that was the true villain here.
We can't fail.
Because not only can we not fail, we will move forward, period. And that's ultimately what led to this, is the fact that they should have known better. They absolutely should have.
They should have, yeah.
But their climate was so production-oriented.
Well, part of this, though, I think, is the fact that this was the Teacher in Space launch.
That's correct. There's a political environment.
If it had been delayed already a couple of times.
Yes. If it had been any other launch, this might not have gone off.
That's possible. They may have been more... We'll never know, of course.
Yeah, we'll never know. But I personally, I believe that was part of the decision making. You know, we got the press all over this. We can't delay yet again because it's too cold. Because we'll be ridiculed. Blah blah blah. Whatever the reasoning, I think the politics of it played a good deal of
and many of those decision makers themselves were vilified, rightfully so in many respects. I don't want to be to go too easy on them.
Yeah, I mean there were managers at both Morton Thiokol and at NASA who overruled engineers.
Correct.
That brought up these issues.
And therein, and of course, this all comes to light in the investigation.
Yeah.
And I do not. I presume many of these folks are still alive. I'm sure they have very hard. Maybe not. I worry about their conscience, because I am sure once reality sets in, they realize, my God bones, what have I done? To steal Star Trek from you again. That's in the same moment. But everything changed. Yeah. Everything changed after that. I remember the moment walking up because I had watched probably maybe 30 to 40 minutes of the coverage before I had to go to class, because it's 12:30 class at this time on that day, and that's all you could just see.
So back then, that meant it was a
Tuesday. That's right.
Yeah, Tuesday.
Yeah. So that's why it was, and it's production management, Dr. Stein, actually, for me. So it's not a real gabby group. I mean, it's very focused on almost engineering mathematics. But the mood in there was just like, did you hear? And it's going around, and there's no chit chat going on. Yeah. It's just like, holy crap, we've all been gobsmacked by this. And I don't recall Dr. Stein speaking of it. I think we went into class just as normal, but it was very different.
Yeah. Yeah. Batman and I were between classes walking around campus. I think then it was called Fraser Hall. Yeah. Is that what it's still called now?
I think it's still called Fraser, but it's part of a bigger thing.
Yeah, they give it a...
Yeah, it's something Dining Commons.
Yeah,
it was Costa Commons at the time we were there. So you're over in Fraser. I was in the dorms.
You were at K-New.
I was in Newman, and I walked down the hill and up into my class was in the administration building.
Although we called it Kennedy Newman. Kids nowadays, they had to abbreviate.
They had to abbreviate to K-New. Yes. So we were at Fraser, and another student's office.
You were on the other side.
I was in the Concord office up on the second floor of Fraser, above the cafeteria.
Yeah, and he told us, did you hear the shuttle blew up? And we were like, that doesn't even make any sense. That's not a sentence. Yeah, it's like saying...
Those words don't make any sense put together.
Purple. That doesn't make any sense.
Exactly. Yeah, I remember I was working on something that was due, so I was like feverishly working on it, and I kind of heard the background when people talking.
Yeah.
And it's like, I was like you, it was like, what? That's... Somebody's screwing around.
Yeah, screwing. Because I saw it actually happen. Once news coverage covered, and that's why I didn't have any doubt. But there were those people around us that were like you all. That what?
Yeah.
But I knew.
I don't remember anything else from the rest of the day. Just that.
I remember watching, because we had a little black and white in the office.
Yeah, and that's what I had in my dorm room.
It was a little 13-inch that you had back then. And, computer screens are bigger than that now on the laptops. And I distinctly remember all of us viscerally flinched when it blew.
When you saw it
play. Just your insides go cold.
Yeah.
Because they edited it down where it's the moment. And that's it.
Well, you got to see, depending on what part of a broadcast, from beginning to end and beyond, with those rockets just going all over the place.
Yep.
And then I remember a scene after I left there, watching again on the bigger screen TV over by the doors leading to the square.
That's where we, I think, sat down and watched that.
Yeah. And, it was bigger TV, it was color, and I remember standing around the TV with a bunch of people watching that again and again. And I don't remember where I went. I'm like you. I have no idea what happened after that.
I don't know if
I had an
went on
evening
to
class that
or not.
night, marketing actually, Dr. Chandramuli, and by that time more was known, and it was a different tone at that point. It was like we've gotten over a little bit of the initial shock, and the grieving is starting to set in. Like, how could this happen? And that's when that was the question. Earlier in the day it was what? And then it's how and why, and of course the why kind of came later.
Yeah, of course everybody remembers the controller who's doing the voiceover. Obviously there's been a major malfunction. It's kind of ridiculed, but the guy didn't know what the hell to say.
Well, they needed to give him a little bit of a break because
hindsight. It's hard to know. They don't always have visual.
Right.
At one point, all they knew is they didn't have downlink, which no telemetry from the vehicle.
And theoretically, actually, we do know that some of them were alive after the initial explosion, just like with the Columbia 20 years later, 15 years later.
That's right. And they actually found, and this was I think a year later, maybe even more than that, they found the crew compartment at the bottom of the ocean.
Yes. Yeah. They found a significant portion of the shuttle.
Right, down there, and which was kind of gobsmacked, and they were pretty much believing that death occurred when they impacted with the water because of the violent nature.
At least for a couple of the crew members.
Yeah. If anyone
there was some evidence that some of the controls and that they'd been trying to do something.
Right.
They hit some of the switches.
The suits that they're wearing, they're not true space suits. They're more like environmental suits.
Yeah.
There was evidence that those had been adjusted to trying to get their helmets on, or they had their helmets, but to turn on the oxygen in the suits, things like that.
Yes.
Right. So they obviously survived the explosion, which
at least some,
which is kind of
they think the commander didn't, that Dick Scobie maybe didn't, because they think people were trying to do things for him.
Could be, yeah.
So
yeah, they definitely knew what had happened. This was not something,
and that of course was the inconceivable part for most people.
Yeah, because it took 73 seconds to blow up, but a lot longer to actually fall to the earth.
That's right, and
that's however long it was, it probably seemed 100 times longer.
Right, and to know that you're literally, it's like literally falling from the sky.
Yeah.
And that's what shook. I think that shook America again after the fact, because it's like I said, I think maybe 2 years later when they actually found those remains, and they're thinking, oh my God! Not only did they die, they died knowing what was happening. It was not
at least to a degree,
to some degree.
Apparently, there was some recording of somebody said, "Uh oh."
Yeah.
Yes.
In the crew area, in the cockpit of the vehicle, somebody said, "Uh oh." What that meant, we don't know, but
and
some hint that something was wrong. Apparently, you can if the external tank burns through, the pressure the liquid oxygen is under drops significantly, and they monitor that. And that's something they could tell. Something's wrong. The engines, the very famous, the last part on the TV broadcast is, go with throttle up.
Yes, and people initially thought that was the cause. No, it wasn't.
It's kind of coincidence. It was
just
going
coincidence, yeah.
But go with throttle up, and then immediately the explosion.
Yeah, and looking back at the video, which obviously it's fascinating to look at because you want to know why, and you're looking at all these things trying to. It's like watching the Columbia video, which you actually got some better video because of where they were in the sky, because they were going across the sky, not straight up.
Right,
and some of the cameras are a lot better 15 years later. So you can actually see parts of the shuttle as it's coming down right before it breaks up.
But that was a different experience.
It was.
And I think that's important that we mention that because, and I do not want to say necessarily we were desensitized at that time, but we were.
Well, it wasn't as shocking because we'd already been through it once.
Well, that's kind of, and
it was shocking in the sense that, hey, we shouldn't have to go through this again. Didn't we fix all this before?
Well, and you're exactly correct. And it was like learning a lesson that you don't really learn, and you have to learn it again.
But as we found out, this one was entirely different.
That is correct.
And honestly, this one truly is more of a, oh my God, how could we have predicted this? Because it's such a fluke the way it happened.
And see, and that to me is something that we can live with. We recognize
we can live
risks.
with it, I think, but in some ways, I think it's harder because it's such a fluke. I mean, yeah, the other one it's hard to live with because it was preventable.
Correct.
This one's hard to live with because it's not preventable. Because it was something that was just total. Because if that piece of foam from the liquid tank hits at a slightly different angle, it doesn't create a hole in the wing. If it doesn't create a hole in the wing, all that plasma from reentry doesn't get inside of it and burn the thing out from the inside.
That's right. It's an amazing moment because it goes back. The Columbia was, it goes back to the old James T. Kirk, and you knew I'm going to bring this up. Risk is our business. That's what the Starship is about. That's why we're aboard her. Those, even though those words echoed in my head when that happened. I realized after we knew what happened, I'm thinking, okay, yeah, damn, it's a tragedy. But these folks signed on for that, and we mourn them and we celebrate them, and it's just one of the casualties of moving things forward. The Challenger had something totally different than that. It was, this should never have happened.
Yeah.
And that's the difference in my mind.
Yeah, I think this is a good spot to take a bourbon break.
Yes.
Yes,
I was about to do that, yes. Because we do want to raise a glass to the memory of
let's
the Challenger
give those
7.
the 7 names again.
So, the 7 names, sorry, I had scrolled down from the names looking at...
yes, Dick Scobie.
Ron
McNair.
Actually, Francis Dick Scobie, Michael Smith,
Yes.
Ellison Onizuka, Judith Resnick, Ronald McNair, Greg Jarvis, and of course Krista McAuliffe.
And those names are not unknown today.
Well,
you could speak those names, or at least a few of them.
Yeah.
And everybody knows Krista McAuliffe.
Correct. That name is
honestly, I think Judith Resnick is and Ron McNair are probably the other two that are most widely known.
I don't know. Ellison Onizuka comes forth.
Only
because it's a Japanese name, and there's you can't mix that in with remembering somebody else. His is very unique.
Well, there's a couple of interesting things about Ellison Onizuka too. Of course, I don't have to tell you guys, in several episodes of Next Generation, one of the shuttlecraft is named the Onizuka.
Yes, that's correct.
I loved that.
Third season, that's right.
That was wonderful of the producers to do.
Because that was only in 1989. That's 3 years later.
Yeah, Trek has been awesome at naming their ships after famous people in the space program, which is very nice.
Yeah.
They've been very good.
And also, I think recently, even ESPN, because Onizuka took one of his kids' soccer balls. The astronauts are always allowed these personal items.
Sure.
So that when they come back, they say, oh, this has been to space.
Didn't Ron McNair take a musical instrument, like a trumpet or something?
I think so.
Because he was in a jazz band or something.
Yes. They were all very interesting people. They had sidelights besides being astronauts. But Onizuka's, his kids still went to high school in Houston, and the soccer ball was recovered. A lot of their personal items were recovered because they were in containers that were sealed. And the soccer ball is still at this Houston area high school.
That's awesome. That is phenomenal.
Not that, hardly anybody even understands, why is this dusty soccer ball in this case over here?
Because it's important, you little dweeb.
But yeah, Onizuka especially, I think, and Krista McAuliffe are their names kind of stay out there. And again, part of that due to Star Trek and the producers, and it's pretty awesome.
Yeah, a glass to them.
A glass to them.
Amen.
May their souls rest in peace. Mm-hmm. And may they forever inspire those who endeavor to do things that are both risky and important.
Again, the future belongs to the brave.
That's right. Absolutely. And they were indeed that.
Absolutely.
Amen. Brothers, sisters,
Robert,
siblings.
you also had another couple of salutes you wanted to do.
Yes, while we are at it.
To some figures that were recently lost.
Yes, so recently we lost Bob Dole. Bob Dole is the last of the old guard.
Yeah, he was a senator at the time this happened.
Yes. Yeah. Well, he was a senator practically, when Moses was leading them out of Egypt.
Yes,
he could say
he was he was like I said, he was the last of the old guard. He was not quite a Reagan conservative.
No, they had their clashes.
They had their clashes. He was seen as a more moderate, middle of the road kind of guy.
A moderate conservative, yes. Very much
honestly,
so.
by today's standards, I think he would be seen as a rhino because he was not.
Yeah. Well, he wasn't a movement guy.
Right.
He was more one of those.
He was a politician.
He was an old, just old fashioned.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that and he understood. And this is something that when you are movement oriented, like we all are at times in our lives, you forget that those guys that are not movement oriented are the ones who actually get the work done.
Yeah.
And he was one of those guys. He was one of those guys that realized, look, I don't like necessarily their positions, but I still got to work with these guys.
Yeah, because nothing happens if we don't.
Exactly.
And he wanted to produce more.
And while in general, if Congress can't get a whole lot done, I think that's not necessarily a bad thing.
Not a bad thing, but he was. The idea was to move things forward for the people.
Exactly. Right. He's an incredibly honorable man.
10th Mountain Division, World War II.
Yes.
Again, very dramatically wounded.
Yes. Always carried a pencil or something else in his hand because his hand was wounded and he could basically.
He took machine gun bullets all up one side.
Yeah.
And I believe, if I remember this right, treated perhaps in an Armenian hospital.
I do not remember for sure.
But he was very much, one of his things was, yes, in World War I, that was genocide, the Armenian genocide. He owed a debt, I think it was, to Armenian people.
Well, he was, whether you liked him or not as a politician, he was an honorable man.
Yeah.
Yes. Although I gotta say, during the 1996 convention, where he was nominated, where he finally got to run,
yes,
it was his turn, and his wife Libby Dole has the night where she gives the speech, and she was the first one to ever go down on the floor and walk amongst
the delegates,
people.
Yeah.
And we're all sitting there watching, and we're thinking, "My God, we nominated the wrong Dole."
Yeah. She was in high ascendancy after that. She was seen as she was a very good strength for him.
And then
she had more
senator
energy
in her own right.
She did, yes,
she did, very much so. Yeah.
She is. They were a power couple before you really knew what that meant.
Yeah.
They honestly, I think they were better at being a political couple than Hillary and Bill could ever hope to be. But Bob Dole was one of the greats. I didn't always like his style or what he did, but he
was respected even across the
aisle.
He was
greatly respected.
He was very much respected.
He really was, I think, good at what he did. I think he was good for the country. I can't say that about every Republican, certainly, or every Democrat of any stripe. But he was one that was, and he is one that died at 98, and didn't really realize he was still around because he's 98.
Well, you
don't think about somebody that old.
He took, especially saluting veterans, very seriously.
Yes.
Again, confined to a wheelchair, very, very elderly, but stood at George H.W. Bush's funeral.
Yes.
It's like, oh, okay. That's a real sign of respect.
Yes, that's why I say he's an honorable man.
Yes.
Yeah, well, both were veterans, and he understood. They both understood. Yes. That was a big deal.
Again, the 10th Mountain Division, heavily engaged in Europe in World War II. So he saw his share. He did his share.
The other thing that, let's do the last thing before we raise our toast, but one of the other things that I thought made him an honorable man was when he was running in 1996, he resigned his post in the Senate to devote his time full-time to the campaign. Because he said, I can't do both, and the people of my state deserve representation. Now, that was partially a political move in the sense that he was hoping that would give him a boost, and it did.
It did, yeah.
That actually did give him a boost. Not as long-lasting as he would have liked, but, the fact that he was willing to do that, because he could have served for many, many years.
Oh, yeah, and it was very much it was a military veteran thing. He's the general who goes to the front lines, steps off his horse and sends the horse back and stands with his men. He understood that. That's exactly what that move was.
It was like Patton riding in a tank,
That's right. You're there.
He's there.
You're there with your folks, and that's we're going to win this.
And then there was one more person you wanted to salute.
Let's toast Bob.
Oh, you want to salute Bob?
Oh, you want to do them individually? Yes.
So Snakes and Otters salutes Bob Dole.
Well, yes. Snakes and Otters salutes Bob Dole. Snakes and Otters loves some Bob Dole.
Amen. Amen. I love the cheese commercial that was done shortly after that '96 campaign. It was about a guy running for office that says he doesn't like cheese. And they have all sorts of things that happen through this, and they brought in Bob Dole, and he speaks because he often spoke of himself in third person. And he would say, "Well, I'll tell you what this guy. I'll tell you what Bob Dole thinks. I think Bob Dole thinks this guy's a doofus." And of course, the commercial ends with the guy saying, who is now politically destroyed. He says, "I am not a doofus." So it's an amazing kind of playoff on that.
A week or two after the election, he was on Saturday Night Live. Now they would never have a Republican on now. But he was hilarious. I watched that, and I didn't. That was the only time I watched Saturday Night Live in years, probably around then, because it hadn't been funny in forever. And watching him on that, all I kept thinking was, "Where was this guy?"
Yeah.
This guy, if this guy had run, he might have beaten Clinton. Certainly would have had a better showing. But he was a little too stiff for his own good sometimes.
Well, he was older than Clinton, and Clinton's youth, relatively speaking, played heavily. He was fair. And again, it's hard to unseat a sitting president.
It is.
We don't do that much. We don't like doing that much. Happens occasionally, but
it does. Much. So anyway, the next one, this one is Cultural Touchstone.
I was going to say, talk about a gear shift here, folks.
It is. They're not quite total opposites necessarily, but certainly in professions they just about are. So Michael Nesmith, singer, songwriter, guitarist, actor.
Yeah.
Hey, we're the Monkees.
That's true. The Monkees who were created for a television show.
Yes, and for the longest time, they weren't even allowed to play their own instruments on the albums they released.
Yeah.
That's why they first went on tour, was to prove they could actually play their instruments.
Yeah.
So whenever I think of Michael Nesmith and the Monkees, the first song I think of is "Listen to the Band," because it's one of the few that he actually sang.
Yeah.
Oh, that's true. I had forgotten that one.
I love that one. It's a really good one.
Do you guys even remember the TV show?
Oh, yeah.
I was going to say, I thought we did.
Yeah, I mean it was syndication enough that there were episodes. I turned up, I think, in the 90s on Nickelodeon.
Well, see, I remember when it was broadcast. Just barely, because it was designed for kids. I mean, it wasn't exclusively for kids. It was
somewhat.
I don't know. I think
it was humor oriented.
It was kind of a knowing nod to the counterculture that was sanitized enough where young people would be cool.
Correct,
but they were extremely popular.
There were nods. There were nods to things like drug use and counterculture. I mean, it was in there.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
It was also in the moment of, this is the time when Batman the TV series was in high ascendancy. So camp, that type of a humor was very, very popular.
And
it was that same type of humor.
Yeah.
And I can remember watching these as a kid, some of these things, and it was like, whoa, this is cool.
My sister loved the Monkees, and we still tell jokes from the show.
I can't do that one, but
no. The joke is I forget which one of the Monkees is, but would you care to join me in a cup of tea? And the response is, do you think we'll both fit?
Oh, okay.
So I mean, that
sounds like one of Mike Nesmith's lines.
It probably was a Mickey Dolenz Mike Nesmith line.
Well, and Davy Jones got a lot of the press because he was the heartthrob. He was the one all the girls loved, and that was, of course, deliberate on the creators' intentions.
Well, this was supposed to be the answer to the Beatles for America.
That's right.
And there was recently a streaming movie. I don't remember where it was, but it was about the Monkees, their history, how they were put together. The actors were great. They did a phenomenal job portraying them. And there's a bit where they go over to England. And everyone goes crazy over them, including the Beatles.
Yeah.
The Beatles were anxious to meet these guys because they actually liked them.
Because by that time, they had enough quality music put forth, because ultimately that's what they stood or fell on that. And I mean, many of those songs are part of our culture today.
Yeah,
I mean, the Monkees. There's several of their songs always on my playlists.
Yeah, Pleasant Valley Sunday. I love Pleasant Valley Sunday.
Last Train to Clarksville. Daydream Believer.
Which is maybe their biggest.
All kinds of different ones.
I mean, they really pulled off, despite being the prefab four, as they were called.
Right.
They really pulled off, like I said, this humor comedy, being in this cultural moment, and a ton of music. Some of it their own, some of it, of course, written for them. But
they made it their own.
Right. They did all the singing for sure. they didn't always get to play their instruments until later.
Yeah.
Now, after they saw that met the Beatles, that's when they had started to actually decline in the sense that they'd gotten into the drugs, and the movie implied that the Monkees are the ones that introduced the Beatles to the drug culture.
Yeah, but
which I find a little hard to believe.
Well, you see, by that time, you're talking late Beatle, what, 69, 68? Something like that?
I don't know when they went over there, because the movie seemed to imply there was still a few years left of
but it was still post Sgt. Pepper's, I'm sure. And those Beatles are very different than before that. Yeah. And
I don't know if it was post Sgt. Pepper's.
Maybe not.
Because again, assuming the movie is correct in how they are portrayed, they're not yet the hippie look.
Yeah, no beards. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. If they're clean shaven,
a little bit more clean cut. Not entirely, but longer hair, not the really 60s advertising man kind of look that they had when they first came over.
Well, no Let It Be stuff, which is
right. So, but anyways, I just thought that was an interesting thing.
Yeah.
But Mike Nesmith is gone. He's the third of the four. Only Mickey Dolenz is left. Mickey Dolenz said, "I've lost a great friend."
Yeah, the two of them were really close.
Yes,
they weren't always. The whole group wasn't always close. But again,
but they generally got along.
They did try to start writing their own music. That was a big turning point. Again,
they did their own movie, which bombed.
The waning of the show, and again, a show like that's going to have a moment, and then
it's got a limited expiration.
That shtick will get old fast. But they tried to write their own music and put out successful albums. All through the late '60s.
Yeah. So and Mike Nesmith, he went into music production. He was a producer at one of the big labels, probably multiple labels. But
is he the one that also delved into digital music production, or was that Dolenz?
Honestly, I don't know.
I think one of them even, got into the digital stuff at the turn of the '90s.
In a time when that was somewhat groundbreaking.
Yeah. Now, when they first got back together in the '80s for a reunion tour, Nesmith did not go. It was just the other three.
Yes.
I remember one of them did not. I couldn't remember which one it was.
They've been in and out. Yeah.
But when they did a later tour together, all four of them did get back. So Nesmith did return and do that, which was awesome. But I have such fond memories of the music as a kid.
And the show. It's still satisfying.
Yeah, I still have the Best Of album on my playlist. My massive one.
And it's generational too, because my kids like it.
Oh yeah,
I mean,
my son likes it.
Good music is good music is good music, and it should survive the test.
Yeah. Again, a lot of that early stuff they didn't write. That was written by songwriting pros, which usually does make it hold up.
Yeah,
long term.
Well, a lot of musicians don't write their own music, because that's hard.
Well, that's right. Well, Nashville, the whole country music piece, it's very few right there. There's an industry down there that's around that thing that they're writing.
The whole Coyote Ugly thing, where she wants to be a songwriter.
Yeah,
that's part. I mean, that's exactly what.
That's exactly what it does.
That's tying into.
There's a whole industry down there of folks that write songs for country stars, and they say this sounds like so and so, and they'll pitch it to the labels who run those, and the stars will say, "Okay, I can do that." I mean, Sarah Evans is a great example. She never writes anything, but everything that comes to her,
as long as they can sing it, that's the important thing.
Well, that's right, and it's designed for that.
So, raise a glass to Mike Nesmith. May he rest in peace as well.
Indeed. An era ends.
Yes. Well, not quite.
Mickey's still around, and
So, anyways, back to Challenger.
And, as
we've talked a lot about the people and of course the some of the circumstances, and I think really the thing left to talk about without pummeling the expired equine is how this changed the space program.
Yeah,
it was 2.5 years before we sent up another space shuttle.
Yeah,
they re-engineered their entire process.
Right. Yeah, we definitely got a bloody nose over this.
The solid rocket boosters were redesigned. The procedures were redone.
Yep.
They created an office of
safety.
Which blows your mind that they didn't have one before.
Yeah. Well, but it was an office that could call off a launch now.
Right.
Yeah. And
they had somebody who could actually veto
it. That's right. It was not something that was ceremonial or just bureaucratic. It actually was intended to be the right thing. And evolution was served. You adapt. As you needed to, and we certainly did. But the beautiful thing is, the program did not end.
No, it did not end. That was it was one of those things where the shuttle is still relatively new. The first launch actually into space had only been 5 years prior, in 1981. And with John Young, who was an Apollo astronaut, and Bob Crippen, who was the co-pilot on that first one. Yeah. Crippen went up again later. I think Young, that was his last flight. He was a little bit elderly for the space program. It was his last hurrah.
Speaking of which, John Glenn goes on the shuttle later.
Yes,
and which was a big moment at the time.
Yes.
Was he still a sitting senator at that time?
Yes.
I think he was. Who was the other senator that went
Jake
up?
Garn.
Jake Garn, yes. I knew there was another one, yes.
Which was a very, they came back stronger than they were, and that's weird. Because
they got the funding to build another space shuttle to replace, because originally there were going to be 5.
Yeah,
budget cuts took it down to 4, and if you remember, the shuttle originally was pitched as we can turn these suckers around every 2 weeks. We can have a launch every 2 weeks. Now that's with a rotating shuttle.
Yeah, because it really was, the idea was to have 24 launches a year.
Right, and so obviously we never attained anywhere near that. It was a very expensive proposition.
Yeah.
But, once you're locked in, you're kind of locked in.
The American people were very much behind that, though.
Yes.
We didn't mind our tax dollars going for that.
Yeah. Replacing the shuttle was, I think, important to the American psyche.
It was.
Yeah. And, so you're right. Endeavour became the new 4th shuttle. And then, we were humming along for 15 years.
Yeah.
Until Columbia. Losing Columbia was the death knell of the program. Columbia was the oldest shuttle. At the time, matter of fact, it was 20 years old when it went up. That's an astounding thing when you think about it. We sent up something that was built in the 1980s. I mean, that's not quite test tube technology, but damn, it's not far.
Well, and it's a beating.
Right. It's a beating.
The shuttles took a beating on this cycle of launch and return.
Right. Jim, the Enterprise is 20 years old. We feel her time is over. That's kind of
which is kind of silly when you think about that.
That's correct. That's
right. The shuttle, though, I mean, that's
it made sense for that.
It makes more sense for that. And so, we went a few more years, basically playing out what we could, and we still don't have a government launch vehicle yet. We are relying on private enterprise and foreign countries,
which seems very weird to us that live through this. That's not supposed to happen.
Well, I don't mind the private enterprise. Yeah. The SpaceX launches, things like that. It's relying on the Russians or somebody else,
or the Chinese,
We
were talking about going to the moon.
Yes,
and you think about that. In the 80s, that would have been absolutely abhorrent to the American people. But with the end of the Cold War, everything changed.
I don't know that the Chinese are all that close to getting there.
Perhaps. There's talk about it. I don't know if it'll actually happen.
It's kind of a shrug, though. We're like, let them. We got stuff to do.
Well, we got stuff to do.
That's the change, though. That's the change.
Bought the t-shirt.
It's all of a sudden, we don't need it like we did. And I hate that. Because I don't think it was just a matter of national pride to do this. I think, the spirit of exploration has been muted by that fact. And I'm more than that.
But, to Martin's point, been there, done that. Having done it is a fantastic thing. But now what are you going to do with that is the thing. Talking about putting a base on the...
Yeah, Mars was the thing.
Well... But again, once you've been there, really, what are you going to do with it? Because unless you can bring stuff back, you're really kind of sending somebody off to die on another planet. Because getting somebody back is a big deal. And maybe you will, because I'm sure that it's but those first people who go there, who knows if they will ever come back?
Yeah, that's right.
And because you don't know that the base is going to be able to last. Even going to the moon, being only 236,000 miles away, it's a crapshoot whether or not.
Yeah,
that will be a success.
Bringing back home again safely is the trick.
To me, the more important thing is where we were headed, which was actually doing stuff in space that advanced human knowledge and provided benefits on the Earth.
That's right.
There are certain experiments and things you can only do in zero gravity that produce certain medicines and what have you that can be used here. And certain other things you can only do in zero gravity that I think are important.
Yeah. And
that's why I like the International Space Station, although I still think it should have been called Space Station Freedom, like Reagan wanted it to be called.
Yeah.
But, whatever.
Yeah. But I'm with Francis. It's important that we get that sense of exploration, that need to explore back.
Yeah,
to me, it's not the need to explore; it's the need to keep going, doing more and more
to learn.
That's all wrapped up together. That's right.
But I don't think you necessarily have to go and establish a base on the moon or Mars.
We just need to get back out.
We need to get back out there, having more permanent presence on the space station, on a real space station. Really, as long as it's lasted probably as long as anybody ever thought it would.
Yeah.
But it's still kind of it's not quite as bad as that Russian space station in Armageddon, where you think it's going to blow up any second.
Yeah.
But it's getting up there in age too.
So you don't see any value in a space station, moon-based Clavius, to steal from 2001?
Not yet, because I don't know. What are we going to do once we're there?
Yeah. We need to get back out there, explore, understand what long-term space exploration does to the human body. Which we know a lot of this.
We do know a lot of that, yeah.
But we need to get out there again. Even you don't have to even touch down on Mars. If we could just get to the point of orbiting Mars and coming home, talk about an incredible step forward.
Yeah.
All of these things. I want to know what the purpose is. If we do these things so that it's a stepping stone to mining the asteroid belt beyond Mars, for instance.
See,
I think is a much better goal.
The moon may hold this. We're not sure.
And the moon may.
And that's one of the reasons to try that.
Well, that's why I am all for going back, doing surveys, being able to stay a little bit longer. But a permanent base, I don't know.
No, it'd be a mining colony. And that's what science fiction's done a lot of that. Outlands.
A mining colony is one thing.
Yeah.
But you got to do the other stuff. You got to go and surf. You got to do all these other things, because now putting a mining colony on the moon is a crapshoot, because you don't really know what's there. We've only been there less than a half dozen times.
Right, and that's the issue. And they're speculating more. They're figuring out more. There's apparently a lot of oxygen available.
Locked in the rocks.
Locked in the rocks. So that would make it all of a sudden something that was more feasible. That's literally just a few weeks old.
In the meantime, I'm fine with Bezos shooting football players into space or actors.
I was going to say, come on now.
I'm good with it.
Shat went. We can't. I was not
Strahan's going.
I was not a fan of Bezos. I thought that's the best you can do for humanity is have your glory moment.
I like that he's doing this,
but they're learning
privately.
That's right. I mean,
because
it's his money.
It's his money, but more importantly, I don't think that we need to let the government be the only one doing this, pushing the boundaries, because they're not going to necessarily be the best at it. Now, the government probably, oddly enough, because you think, well, the government's fairly reckless in a lot of ways. Challenger is a good example of that. The government, with all the regulation that goes on, has probably stopped Bezos and who's the other guy?
Musk. Elon
Musk. From doing stupid stuff. Mostly Bezos, I think, is the one that they've halted. Is it him or Musk that they've halted launches for? Because they're saying you're not being safe.
Bezos is going because the flight with Michael Strahan's coming up soon.
Right, but I mean, they had to.
So it must have been
Elon Musk. Yeah.
Well, I mean, they haven't stopped permanently. It just particular launches that they halted.
But I mean, the leap forward that they've made is the idea of a recoverable rocket. Even with the shuttle, the rockets aren't terribly recoverable.
Well, the solid rocket boosters were. Those are reused. The liquid tank was not.
Yeah.
Because that went too far up to be able to come down and be reusable.
So they've got the Dragon and the Falcon X and all. It's amazing. And keep going.
And that's private enterprise doing this. Now, I think it's important to let them keep doing it because I don't know that NASA is capable of the kind of things that ought to be done as the only agency doing it.
Keep going.
The fact is, they're
fully
not
in support. I mean, there's people bagging on it and saying, "Oh, that's what you spend your money on." Hey, one, it's his money, and two, we are still learning. We are still advancing. Yes, it's a little bit of celebrity in space thing, but we're advancing.
But there's also lots of jobs tied up into this too. It's not like he's just blowing money and nobody's getting any benefit out of this.
That's right. Yeah, I mean,
that's the thing. That's why. something like Challenger and Columbia and Apollo 1. Or who was the Russian cosmonaut that there was a Russian cosmonaut that died as well.
That
was back in the early 60s.
Yeah, I do not recall.
All of these fatalities, tragic as they are, have to be used as a reason to go forward, not a reason to stop.
Right.
That's what Reagan was talking about at the end of that speech. One, it's to honor their memory, because they were doing something that very few people could do or would want to do. And even of those that could and would want, very few get picked. So, these are the best of the best.
Yes. And
the fact that they are willing to do these things for what is at the moment a nebulous benefit. Because, in the beginning it really is.
Yeah.
You don't really know for sure what the good is that's going to be. Maybe you're going to push your knowledge boundaries to a certain amount. Maybe you're not. But, it's important to keep going because of these losses.
I think that's a great spot to end on, actually.
Yes. What's next, Francis, buddy?
Code of Honor next time. We're going to be quoting who knows what. We've not overly produced this, as we don't normally do anyway.
Nope, we are not doing a themed Code of Honor this time.
It's going to be straight open. Who knows what you're going to get, but I can tell you this, it's going to be awesome. Join us.
Hope you enjoyed another pointless discussion of eternal questions. Remember, new episodes published every Friday at noon Eastern.
Spread the word. We're on all the major podcast platforms. And leave us a comment or review because that helps others find us.
We're on Instagram, Twitter, as well as our website, snakesandotters.com.
I'm Martin.
And I'm Robert.
And I'm Francis. Join us next week. Same snake time, same otter channel.